I'm so thrilled to be joining the two of you today for today's conversation. I'm going to leave it to the two of you to introduce yourselves, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, hi Joanna. I'm Irene Rombel, the CEO and co-founder of BioCurie.
And tell us a little bit about BioCurie.
So we are developing the first scalable AI-driven platform for process development and manufacturing of advanced therapies. So that includes cell therapies, gene therapies, and nucleic acid therapies.
My name is Dr. Kevin Baumlin. I am the Chief Medical Affairs Officer here at the Science Center. My background is that I'm an emergency physician and clinical informaticist. I've been here for the last 3+ years, and I work with medtech startups throughout the region.
Awesome.
And the country and the world.
Yeah. And can you tell us a little bit about the Science Center as well, in terms of their role in Philadelphia and the role that you play with the Science Center as well?
Yeah, the Science Center is a 63-year-old nonprofit here in West Philadelphia, and we're all about building the science ecosystem here and bringing together people, convening people, and helping the scientists grow with their intellectual property and build a community where we can explore and discover and do that quicker.
I'm excited to have this conversation, and it's very timely because there's a lot of wonderful growth happening in Philadelphia. We just talked a little bit about some of the few breakthrough gene therapies that came through, and the Science Center's role and how you're helping to support the ecosystem here, because BioCurie actually just went through the Capital Readiness Program here and secured a $9.3 million ARPA-H funding grant. So I'm really excited to dive into sort of how that happened, but a little bit more about just in general BioCurie and what you're all about and the science behind it. So just to kind of kick things off, Philadelphia keeps producing firsts, the first gene therapy, first cell therapy, mRNA vaccine, all out of this region. So what is it about Philadelphia that keeps making that happen? And is there something specific we can point to, or is it harder to name than that?
Well, actually, the three types of therapeutic modalities that you just mentioned, those breakthroughs came out of and shops. Mm-hmm. So I think it's basically very robust, rigorous, best-in-class science. That's first and foremost what has driven a lot of this. But since then, that really catalyzed the formation of a lot of very, very innovative companies in the advanced therapy space in this region. And then, of course, we've got a lot of the big pharma that are in very close proximity too, so that there's that really beautiful synergy.
I agree. Anything that you want to add, Kevin?
Yeah, I'm a history buff, so I would add that we're the birthplace of the first hospital, Pennsylvania Hospital, 275 years this year. A great institution, a new museum, by the way, opening up in the next couple of days. But we are the land of meds and eds. Think about where we sit physically. We sit with Penn on one side, Drexel on the other, Temple and Jefferson right nearby. We're blessed to have a scientist community where you can explore and grow and intersect and become part of and convene with scientists from all different backgrounds, and that helps scientists explore and become better at what they do. That's what's so special about the Philadelphia science ecosystem.
Yeah, I would agree. There's so much great science coming out of all the academic institutions here, and I think we just keep running with it, and with the large pharma that are in the region, it helps with the capital and the synergies and the alliances that are starting to really take place.
Let's not forget New Jersey and Delaware. Rowan, our great partners there, and our partners in Delaware and Christiana, and all the Delaware science community.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, Irene, speaking about industry and what we have here in the region, you've spent years inside it in J&J and Spark before you founded BioCurie. So what did you see from the inside that made you think this is the problem that nobody is solving yet before you founded BioCurie?
Absolutely. So actually, that is also the combination of the last 20 years of my life, and I guess in gene medicine, gene regulation. So everything from how genes are regulated to then how you could possibly make them into therapies, and or leverage that into modalities like cell and nucleic acid therapies. And so when I was at J&J, I was in strategy and external innovation, working a lot on looking for the potential for those breakthrough technologies and new modalities. And that's where I saw with these fantastic new modalities, discovery is not the bottleneck. It's the process development and manufacturing that's the bottleneck, because these are not small molecules or biologics, where discovery is typically the bottleneck and then producing them is pretty commoditized. Here, it's the converse. So it's relatively genetically tractable to figure out how to make an effective product, but then to make these modalities at scale in a cost-effective manner. That's the challenge, because they're so complex from a molecular and a manufacturing standpoint. And then when I went to Spark Therapeutics, sure enough, I saw the same paradigm. So I thought, this is the challenge, and it's a great opportunity to solve, because this is going to be a problem that's going to impact the whole industry. And I was right. But, that's anticipating that solution was really what drove me.
So can you help us understand even more deeply what that manufacturing problem is in plain language? Like gene therapies and cell therapies are so different from traditional small molecules, even ADCs, even biologics. So can you tell us a little bit more about what that bigger manufacturing problem is and why it's so hard for patients to get them?
Yeah. Okay. So first, if you think about the numbers in terms of just the molecular structure, say a small molecule has got fewer than 100 atoms, say about 20 to 100, then an antibody might have around 20,000 atoms. When you get to a viral vector, like a gene therapy, you're looking at 10 to the 5 to 10 to the 7 atoms. When you're looking at a cell therapy, you're looking at 10 to the 22 atoms. So you're looking at orders of magnitude greater molecular complexity. And to make those very complicated molecules, you have very complicated processes. Sometimes they're up to a couple of hundred different steps. You have to get every one of those very right, 100% perfect. They have to be very efficient. So you can imagine any error in any step could mean that you're off specifications. So you have to throw out that batch or throw out that product. So if in the case of a gene therapy, that could mean millions of dollars wasted. Or in the case of a personalized cell therapy, like an autologous cell therapy like CAR-T, that patient could die by the time you can remake their therapy. So these have got really profound consequences if you are not in specification, which, it's not necessarily the difference between total failure, but from this patient standpoint, it's as good as a failure. And from a commercial standpoint, it's a lot of dollars and months down the drain.
Huge amount of dollars that can go down the drain. And some companies have figured out how to do this at scale, but it's still, it's one of the top questions that comes up at some of these advanced therapies conferences is, how do we do this at scale? How do we do this more efficiently? And then on the flip side, how do we make it more cost effective as well? So it feels like what BioCurie is doing is actually solving a couple of different problems. And so if I'm understanding correctly, your platform creates a digital twin, which maybe you can explain that a little bit more so people can understand that a little bit better. But the way that I understand it is it runs millions of virtual experiments before anything actually happens in a physical lab. And so then for somebody like me who doesn't live and breathe all of this in this world, like I'm a pharmacist by training, so I understand, meds and drugs and so forth. But for somebody who doesn't work in the manufacturing world and in this space, what does that actually change? Like, what does that digital twin and all those virtual experiments change in terms of the process? Because you mentioned there's like hundreds of steps in that process.
Great. Starting back with what a digital twin is. The term was coined, I think, in about the 1950s in the aerospace industry, and all a digital twin is, it's a mathematical representation of a physical process, so say like a plane or a plane propeller or something. So in the case of a gene therapy, it's turning the biochemical equation. So if you think in your mind, think about a cartoon of a virus being produced in a cell and that little viral capsids being spat out. You turn all of that into kinetics, all the little, instead of going in and out of the cell, and then you turn that into little equations, then you turn that into an algorithm, then you turn that into a math. All of a sudden you turn physical processes into math. So kind of in a nutshell, that's what it is. And what you can do with that model is basically simulate any process. And so that's what we're doing with cell and gene therapies. We've built those what are called first principles models where we've figured out the biology and have turned that into math. So then we can have highly predictive models. And then at BioCurie, we're also combining that with AI ML so that we can apply those models to so many different variables, like different types of flavors of these different modalities and or slightly different processes depending on which company's developing what. And so that allows you to predict by doing millions of experiments on a computer. And I'm like you, I'm a biochemist, molecular biologist. And so I spent about the first, maybe 15 years of my career getting my hands dirty in the lab, doing lots and lots of experiments, working day and night, weekends, because that's what I did. So in my entire lifetime, I would never be able to do a fraction of the experiments that we can do on a computer very, very quickly. Yeah. And I love that because it's so powerful that just in terms of time and cost, you would never be able to do that in real life.
Yeah, can you actually quantify that for us? How much time does it take to do these virtual experiments compared to what it would take in normal processes?
Well, it's so fast that because I've talked to my technical team, I said, how quickly can we do this? And we're talking about like fractions of a fraction of a second to do every single experiment. So it's super, super fast. And actually part of the outreach proposal is building out our new server with our very fast GPUs and things. So we'll be able to go a lot faster and do a lot more calculations than ever before. So we're very excited.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Yeah. So it's basically a software company in a field that's used to wet labs and physical infrastructure. So how did people actually respond to that when you first started this adventure, and how has that changed?
Well, software has been used in process development and manufacturing actually for decades, but it's, I think it's because it traditionally wasn't very sexy, wasn't talked about much, especially if you're using for small molecules or petroleum or whatever. But there are very well-established companies that have got great tools for doing things like the commoditized small molecules and stuff. But in terms of advanced biotherapeutics, it's nothing like it, because people thought it would be impossible to develop those models until my co-founder, chief scientist Richard Butts at MIT, developed the first mechanistic models for gene therapy and other modalities. And the other thing that we brought to the table before it was sexy in 2023 was in 2021. I said, we're going to use AI ML, and nobody was thinking about it. They were like, what? So we're really pioneers in terms of combining those technologies, and so we have IP on it in our platform.
What has that added layer of the AI ML added to the models that you've created? Like, can you just kind of explain that a little bit for people who aren't living and breathing this as well?
For sure. Yeah. So it makes our proprietary models even a lot more powerful and a lot more adaptable to so many different applications, different variables, like I said, different flavors of the modality or the different flavors of the process. And also it makes, us a lot faster, more efficient, so we can go much, much faster internally. So it's a very powerful tool. It doesn't replace my amazing, engineers, but it makes them go more than 10x faster.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, does that mean that, like, if there's company X that has a process for developing cell therapies and company Y that has another different process for developing their cell therapies in their process management, you can adapt it using your AI and machine learning in the biological model?
Correct, because that's the other nuance of and one of the challenges of our field of advanced therapies is everybody's processes and therapeutics are a bit different, so it's not a monolithic kind of process or modality.
One of the things that I feel like keeps coming up in conversation is, like, how do we work together in the advanced therapy space to maybe standardize how we produce or manufacture cell therapies? So does this actually limit, or does this actually kind of throw that question into the water? Like, do we even have to do that if we have the power of something like this?
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, to some extent, it obviates that the need to totally standardize. Because while yes, ideally in a perfect world there'd be a standardized process, but on the other hand, that would be a limitation too, because that means that's what you're stuck with, and you'll never be able to improve, right? So it's good to have some basic process, but also all these companies have invested huge amounts of money to develop intellectual property, to develop differentiated processes that give them an advantage over their competitors. So why would they want to settle for a one-size-fits-all process? Because you'll never find a single process that's optimal, say for every different type of flavor. I'm trying not to use jargon, but say for a gene therapy, a process that works for every, it's called a serotype, like that's the flavor of the actual virus, or genotype, the gene of interest, the actual payload that you're delivering. There are nuances because they all impact how you need to optimize the process. And so I think trying to standardize it, you're going to compromise and end up with a blah.
That's fair. That's absolutely fair. So that's kind of why I'm asking the question. Like, I want to kind of bring it to light of, like, it doesn't make sense to standardize across for a number of the reasons why you shared, but also you're enabling us to not need to have to do that, but then potentially reducing costs in the development phase. So I want to move on to some of the actual funding question of how you were able to secure this ARPA-H grant. So ARPA-H doesn't fund incremental work. They fund things that are really too bold or too risky for traditional mechanisms. So what did it mean to you to win that validation? And what does this award actually let BioCurie do that it couldn't do?
That's a great question. So first of all, it's technically a contract and not a grant, because ARPA-H awards contract. So that's the funding vehicle that it is. And you're right, they do not fund incremental. Their mandate is to fund basically the moonshots of science and technology. It's the equivalent of DARPA, but for healthcare. And so sometimes they call it upper-reach hard. And if it's too easy and you can meet all your milestones too readily, then they're like, well, maybe it wasn't hard enough. It's not upper-reach hard. So it's supposed to, we are, trying to do the most difficult questions and develop the most challenging technologies. And actually, I heard our program manager at a conference a couple of months ago, the Advanced Therapies Conference, speaking about who they fund, and that she said they basically reject just about everybody because they're only funding the best teams and the best technologies in the world. And after I heard that, I was like, oh my God, why no one that I would have been scared to apply, because that's a pretty high bar. So I'm glad that we did, thanks to Kevin, who encouraged me.
Yeah, well, I was just going to ask, so Kevin, what was it that made you think, and recommend to Irene to apply for, or encourage her? I guess you use the word encourage. What was it about this that really said to you, this could actually win that award?
When I met Irene, I got it.
And it's great. I love it when people get it. Sometimes it's like...
and I think I got it because I've been a practicing emergency physician at the time for about 30 years. One of my areas of interest was sickle cell anemia and treating patients with sickle cell disease. Spent a lot of time trying to help break down the stigmatism and get people treated like humans and appropriately and quickly, and trying to work with patients to advocate for change and for science. And it was right at that moment when I met Irene that there was therapies to cure sickle cell, but
for $3 million.
$3 million. And when we had a conversation about this, you mean you could treat 10 more patients and maybe bring down the cost by 10? That was the great promise.
Yeah.
It was then we have to be interested in this. We have to think about that as a possibility in the short term, not the long term. To me, that was worth it. Mm-hmm. And then when I read the proposal from ARPH, I get a lot of stuff in my inbox, and I was like, this is for Irene. You know what I mean? This was written for BioCurie and Irene, and pushed pretty hard, I think.
Yeah, that was great.
You're I don't know.
It sounded like the impossible, but yeah.
But I was at least let's try. Let's get the first part in and see if they nibble.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And right, the abstract. And if we don't at least try, then let's worry about writing the full proposal later. Let's try first. And we did that. And then we got very little time to do the full proposal.
Yeah, because you have to get invited, and by the time you get invited, then it's basically, I think, have a 50% chance. 50% chance of getting awarded, maybe 5-6 weeks to write what ended up being a 900-page proposal.
Oh my gosh!
So yeah, I probably didn't sleep for 5 weeks. It was intense, but I found out from our program manager that's part of the test to see if you can get your act together would burn very, very quickly and deliberate, and we did.
Yeah, that is amazing. So did that process actually give you? You probably already had clarity about what it is where you were headed, but did that process of writing out that proposal just kind of really put it into place, put it into words of where you're going?
100%, because I'd already come up with the business plan, and Richard had a lot of my co-founder had a lot of the ideas in his head, and it was also the combination of a couple of decades of his research.
Yeah.
But then to really articulate that on paper, and within 30 pages for the technical piece, it forced us to do that, which was a really great exercise, and really to consolidate that and to here are our differentiators, here are our, this is why this is first in class, best in class, et cetera, et cetera. So that was a really very useful process.
And the process of trying to teach our team. Remember, we're a small team at this time, and we have grants writers and non-scientists. And Heath Nacken from our government team is wonderful. This science was new to him, new to me. I'm an emergency physician. I take care of patients, cough, colds, and heart attacks and strokes, and not even CAR T therapy in the ER. Yeah. And through that process, and us saying, can you explain that again? You know what I mean? Helped them tease out. And plus bringing on board one of the special sauces of the Science Center, bringing on our network of not just scientists, but of companies that can help tease through what is the other stuff you need to do? What's the build? What's the environment look like? And that's my interests in informatics and technology. It's like we can bounce off each other and say, well, what do you really need? What's your cybersecurity risk? Who are the vendors you need? What would that look like? Who do we need to bring to the table to bounce this around so we're ready to go when we do get awarded? Like that whole process is important, I think.
Yeah. Oh, lots of questions that you had to tease through, like the cybersecurity risk and the, oh my gosh, so much to like tease through.
So exactly. And the other part was bringing in best-in-class collaborators, that because, as you know, we're a software company, we're not a wet lab company, so we're not going to be generating the gene therapy data ourselves. But fortunately, getting through, a few years of building my network, I already had collaborators at St. Jude and at Charing Cross, and the Centre of Breakthrough Medicine knew that they were all world-class in terms of the quality of their research and the quality of the data that they would bring to the table. And there was already that trust there. So that was great. And Centre of Breakthrough Medicine is here in Pennsylvania. I'm thinking of Russia.
Yeah.
So they were actually, some of them were my former colleagues from J&J, which was great because I knew those guys were awesome.
Yeah. That's great. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, and that consortium, I mean, you had to bring all of those people together to get this whole proposal together, which I think is part of what I wanted to touch on is like, this was not a small feat. It wasn't just you sitting enclosed, like you said, not sleeping for 5 weeks. It was like bringing a whole bunch of collaborators into the mix and really getting best advice, best in class advice, and so forth. So, and I think it sounds like that's a lot of what the Science Center helped do. Can you tell us a little bit more about the role that you played? Like, I know you helped encourage Irene to do this, but tell us a little bit more about the role that Science Center has played overall with BioCurie and helping support Irene in this whole journey.
Yeah, we're not just the cheerleaders. That's part of what I do, to be honest.
We all need a little cheerleaders in our life, right?
And the blender, if you will, of putting all the pieces together and coming out with a really good smoothie. But we're also have technical skills and background administrative support and expertise in the government affairs. And because we have a breadth of contacts, experience, and vendors that we work with, something that seems hard, even just getting onto government websites can sometimes seem so overwhelming. You know what I mean? It can really be like, what? Really? But if you've done it once before, then it's less hard.
Yeah.
It's like getting to milestones quicker. That's all part of what we call the translation project here at the Science Center. Is what we are here to do is get to the milestones quicker. Experts to the table, so you can say, I can't do this. Like, no, we can. We can get this together. We have a large network of people to help, and we're going to help, and we're going to land the plane, and we're going to get there. And that's important role, I think. And we do that for companies, and we continue to do it with our various programs that we have.
Yeah. So if I'm a founder and I approach the Science Center, what would be the kind of the process that I would go through? Would you do some triage of like, what are my needs? Tell us a little bit about like if you have a founder walk through your door, what happens?
So our premier program, actually Capital Readiness program, actually runs again starting next week. It's a 5-day, pretty intense program that keeps getting better and better.
Boot camp. It's great.
It's a boot camp.
Yeah, that's right. You had gone through it.
She's gone through it. That's how we met. And we have applications nationwide. We review the companies. We review where they are in their fundraising journey. Specifically work with companies that are in $0.5 to $1.5 million raised. We help them prepare for the capital journey, how to raise. Some of that's the process of writing SBIR grants or getting the next round of funding. And some of it's ARPA-H or whatever entities are out there for dilutive or non-dilutive funding. And get them to understand what it is to raise and what it looks like so that they can go through the journey with eyes wide open. And it's also about building a community, engaging with each other as founders, engaging with folks like me in our networks and the different folks that are here at the Science Center. And that's important because it's really hard and it's quite a journey.
And how many companies do usually participate in that program?
We do 30 a year, 10
each time.
10 each time. And we also have a U.S. market access program. We have international companies come in. We had a focus on companies from Israel, but that's been on hold for a little while. And we'll hopefully be able to start that up soon. I'm going to stay hopeful. And we're looking at doing a more broad international program. We have other programs here at the Science Center, but the main focus is what we do is as we help companies get from IP to commercialization. And that's what we are here to support, with the reason to bring dollars into the ecosystem and to bring new employees into the ecosystem. BioCurie is doing that as of yesterday, new employees, I think.
Yeah, actually we hired one 2 weeks ago, another one next week, and then another one in 2 weeks' time.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's like,
Yeah.
to me, that's like so great. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
we're actualizing the goal.
Yeah.
You know, in a relatively quick period of time, in a 3-year cycle of time, and went from early company to getting a large award to hiring people to work in the ecosystem.
Yeah.
That's the plan.
Yeah.
You know, and to execute on that is great. It
Yeah.
feels so good. And actually, last week or the week before, I got to see the software, which was, to me, was
Oh, you did
so
the demo.
exciting. The
Yeah.
demo, our first demo. I was like, this is so cool. You know what I mean? Because you could talk about it, think about it, like, I think I get it, you know, and then to see it, it's like, yeah, it's just like what I thought it was going to be, you know, and even better.
Yeah.
And then once people can see it, I can see, we were just having a conversation about investors and BioCurie's next round. Is now that they can see it, now it's going to be even easier to raise money
Yeah.
and large amounts of money
And
to
especially
get to the next level. And
Exactly.
that's the game.
Because we already have customers and collaborators and validation from our approach. I can tell you, I think that due diligence process was more rigorous than anything that I've ever undergone with an investor. I mean, it was long and intense. Great.
Yeah, that is great. So that, I mean, that I actually wanted to ask, and I think I mentioned it earlier, is like, so with this grant, you've now been able to hire into the ecosystem, which is amazing. And then you have an actualized product that you can show to and be able to raise more money. What else does it mean for BioCurie in terms of trajectory? Where are you headed in the next 6 to 12 months?
Yeah. So with the funding that allows us to accelerate probably about 10x in terms of speed, because it doesn't fundamentally change the science that we work or technology we were going to build out, but it means we can go so much faster and get to launch much, much faster, which will be in the second half of this year. And like I said, we've already have early customers. So, and in fact, some of them have, them recently transitioned from a pilot to being a SaaS customer, essentially. So that's our long-term business model, which is pretty great.
Yeah.
So we've been
Congratulations.
Thank
That's
you.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so we're in beta testing with our demo now, and so in a couple of months it's going to be ready for the full launch, which is awesome.
Awesome. Oh my goodness.
And then I think importantly, we can start telling the stories about how this has impact on lives and patients, and really thinking about how you can have an incredible impact. So it's from taking the IP and the science to have impact on patients' lives. That's like the big picture of why we want to do this work. And I think that if we can try and tell the stories about the ALS patient you met.
Yes, yeah.
Tell us about
Was it okay
that.
for you to tell us about
For
that?
sure.
Okay.
Actually, so this was crazy, but last week I went from speaking at the CellCan conference in Canada to it was their annual cell and gene therapy conference, coming here to King of Prussia to speak at the annual ALS conference, which is where I met a number of many patients and their families. That's always the most powerful and motivating, where you're actually seeing how huge that unmet need is. So these are patients with neurodegenerative diseases, not just ALS, but also FTD and Alzheimer's disease. And it's really just so, it's really, I found it really touching when I saw these amazing people that they're fighting. They attended my talk and they understood it. They said, I got it. Because I was talking about AI, but obviously unfortunately, it gets a little bit geeky and technical. But they understand so much in the way of complicated genetics. They know their genotypes
totally.
and they know the difference between a sporadic mutation and a familial mutation. I'm like, oh my God, this is a tough crowd. They really know their stuff. So that was awesome. But in particular, one of the patients that I met, Bill, he was in a clinical trial getting a genomic medicine that was actually slowing the progression of his ALS mutation. And he's got a nano-rare mutation that's rarer than ultra-rare. So he's one of 13 known mutations in the world. But it's working and he's so motivated. And I'm glad that it's at Columbia because I'm on 2 advisory boards at Columbia and I know they're doing great. It makes me so happy when I'm seeing we're actually having an impact. And now we need to scale out. So last year, everybody's probably heard about this amazing little baby KJ, the baby with he got the first personalized, medicine, nucleic acid therapy treatment for his very, very rare condition. Now we need to scale that and make it affordable across all patients. So that's really the dream.
Oh my gosh, what an amazing story. And it's so true. The patients in those niche, unmet, rare diseases know their disease like nobody else because they've had to. They're advocates.
Yeah.
So I've worked in that space, so that's why I'm very familiar with.
Or actually going back to sickle cell disease, which is not rare, it's relatively it's common, which is why the $3 million price tag across a large number of patients is really not gonna fly with the healthcare system. But I met Victoria Gray again at the Advanced Therapies conference. So she was the first patient that received one of the gene-edited gene therapies. It was so profound to hear her journey, etc. But in addition to just trying to fight to get access to these therapies, they have to fight for everything in terms of even getting, whether it's a wheelchair or getting some kind of meds. It's like, oh my God. Yeah. Well, it's challenging.
Yeah, it definitely is this chronic disease. I mean, you probably see it all the time as an emergency medicine physician.
Yeah, and just think about the life expectancy and the long, painful, short life compared to a painless, long life. That's the great hope. So rare diseases are super important, and that's the roadmap to get there. But if we can scale in 10 times the number of patients who are living without pain and living longer, that's incredible. You know, if we could do it in my lifetime, I can't even, we didn't even think that 5 years ago.
I know.
You know, and if we could do that, that's incredible. That's what science and discovery and investments and building ecosystem, and that's what we're here to do. And make those milestones quicker so that more people can get better.
Yeah.
And rare diseases is just the starting point, because if we can get it to work in rare diseases and get to that cost-effective point at which we could scale out to larger disease indications that would talk about Alzheimer's, for example, then we can really have a huge impact across all of society, because those are the long, debilitating diseases that are going to crush us economically, separate from just the humanitarian standpoint. Think about it from an economic standpoint. So I think the government's pretty savvy about that, in terms of, pharmacoeconomics. Right?
Yeah, well, that's exactly where my head went, is so it's not just that it's not just that you're making it faster to manufacture these medicines. It's that you're making them more cost effective for patients, which means that they're higher accessibility to patients. So patients are getting better. But from a macroeconomic standpoint, the pressure on health system could potentially be reduced by, I don't know, have you done any of the math around it?
Yeah.
Actually, I think you did a pharmacoeconomic model for sickle cell disease as part of our proposal.
I think
there was one.
It was in there.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. From an older adult perspective, my research was in improving care for older adults who seek emergency care. Just the cost from Medicare perspective alone, taking care of end-stage Alzheimer's patients versus delaying and the toll on caregivers, as you probably are figuring out. My mother has Alzheimer's end stage right now. It's a rough ride. And if you could make that ride better and have better quality of life, think about the difference you can make in the world. And even give hope to people who are predisposed to Alzheimer's. They're so worried about ending their life that way. Even the glimmer of hope feels real. And if we could translate that and scale that and have an impact on that, it's a big deal.
Well, I don't think I've told you, but actually my mother and my grandmother died of Alzheimer's, and you always think, well, what are the odds that I will get it one day? And,
I think that every day, to be honest.
So, and many of us do, because it's a very prevalent disease, right?
Yeah. Yeah, huge impact and opportunity.
So I know everybody's now chasing longevity. Well, this is a very specific case that deserves a lot of focus.
I haven't immediately been impacted by the disease, but I have known many people, and one of my close friends, their parents are dealing with dementia, potentially Alzheimer's over time. And it is such a toll on the family, on the patient. It's a little bit of the opposite of ALS, where your body is outliving your mind, whereas in ALS, your mind is outliving your body.
That's a really great way of thinking about it. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just, it's so hard to watch those two really, really important parts of ourselves that make us whole, one outliving the other, essentially. So to your point, this could be potentially like groundbreaking, life-changing for a lot of people. So
It's interesting the framing that we've landed on. I know we're going to talk about investment and what's missing in the startup space, is to frame companies like BioCurie as a longevity investment, a play to improve healthy longevity, which doesn't get enough investment. And it's like women's health doesn't get enough investment.
Yeah.
Like there's spaces that need more investment, but you have to be able to take that little leap to understand how this incredible science can help people in all kinds of different areas.
No, that's a great point. And particularly going back to my initial point about cell and gene nucleic acid therapies being so powerful, because you can very readily get at the fundamental mechanism and address the mechanism of action, as opposed to something like a small molecule, which has a much higher failure rate because, you have a lot of off-target binding in it, or an antibody which isn't going to be as specific. It's perfect. Now, if we can only bring the cost down and the scalability up, it would be golden.
Oh my gosh, so much promise. I'm really excited to follow and see what happens. Thank you for sharing so much of this. It's so exciting with this grant. And so I want to transition just one last kind of section about, Philadelphia. And, you've chosen, I know you have multiple kind of sites where you work out of, but Philadelphia seems to be one of the primary ones that we often see you in. So tell us about what influenced your decision to be part of the Philadelphia ecosystem, and what do you believe is still maybe missing?
As we said at the beginning, I worked at J&J and Spark Therapeutics, which are all in this region. So this is a really fantastic space. And one term that I haven't yet mentioned is that this is sometimes called Silicon Valley, which is very cool. So it's pretty unique. But the one thing that it's not so problematic, but it's still a bit of a hole. So that's the funding question. So I would have said 20 years ago, the plan was very much for companies to be in very close proximity to the investor, but that's no longer the case. So money is mobile, and because there aren't necessarily that many specific VCs living in this region, that's no longer a barrier. But nonetheless, for us to get on the radar of VCs in Silicon Valley or up in the Boston region, that's obviously more challenging if we're not there right under their noses. So that's one area that could do with a little bit of improvement.
Yeah.
That's part of what we do here at the Science Center. Every capital readiness program that I was mentioning, for instance, we have 5 investors in residence from the nation. And we think it's important to not just focus on VCs here in the Philadelphia region, because we don't know per group what company we're going to accept. And, we read a proposal and there may be something I think is like, that's super cool. And I'm like advocating like crazy for something. And my team will be like, really, Kev? Like, yeah, but there may not be an investor that's in that investment thesis or in that space. But they may meet someone, through the cohort, and they may engage. We have a female founders group that's come out of this, and they all work together and they throw each other investors in different spaces. Awesome. There's all kinds of opportunity to connect and grow. But if you had to ask me what could we really benefit from in the ecosystem, is more dollars coming, check writing investors in early stage companies in that 0.5 to 1.5 range to help them on the journey. Because that's the hard part. Yeah. And it's the hard part to have that runway to grow and explore and get to the large grant or the large early investor that can really help you get to the next level.
Yeah, but that's a great point, because it gets to that sort of chicken and egg question. So, for example, a lot of the investors that I initially spoke to, well, how many customers do you have? Okay, and then to get a prototype for the customers, you need to have some funding to build out. Yeah. Fortunately, we were able to get grants to do that, and also there was a lot of sweat equity, frankly. I mean, literally, this is what I did day and night without any pay for 4 years, because as a visionary founder, pioneer, crazy person, that's what you do.
Yeah.
But it's not easy. A lot of people give up because it's very challenging. But if you stick at it, and then eventually got to the point we had the prototype, we got our customers, we got our revenue, then got investors, and then got our operation that it worked out. And the irony is, of course, the easiest time to get money is when you don't need it. So now it's a lot easier.
Yeah, we need to fix that. We need to continue working on that to make sure we inspire young scientists and to elevate science and what science is all about and tell those stories and to help scientists who don't have the friends and family runway to be able to sustain themselves through those early years. That's really hard to get investors to believe in the idea before the MVP and then to believe in the software before you see it. I believed, but I was super excited to see it for real.
Yeah.
Like my belief was real. Hey, I wasn't just propping up. I wasn't just telling the story, you know, like that's really hard.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I sat in one of the courses that the Science Center offers is the Angel Investing 101, the public course. I sat in it for the 4 days that it was offered. And it was actually quite eye-opening because the person who teaches it is not in pharmaceutical, like life sciences, they're in apparel. And so hearing the differences in funding and like getting to the MVP and the amounts of funding that you get in different spaces, people underestimate what it means to do drug development in a pre-seed, seed, Series A. Like at Series A, you might not have full, like the goal is to have proof of concept, but maybe you don't have full proof of concept at your Series A. And that's the part, like there's a belief element to it as well, which I think is really hard. It's hard. I was just at a pitch session yesterday and, you know, it's hard to get people to believe when you have 3 minutes to talk about your science.
Yeah, I mean, I guess funnily enough, that's sort of the cute, easy to explain ideas that get a lot more traction because you can explain it. Whereas if you're doing something that's kind of visionary and pioneering, that's harder, right? Especially if we're not like this, you know, there's nothing else that you can peg it to because if you're the first one, it's like, well, we're not like anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Oh my gosh, for sure. And that's part of the reason why you secured this ARPA-H funding because it is so visionary. So
well, actually, and there was a section in the ARPA-H proposal why you have to explain why they should fund you, why a regular SBIR or NIH funding might not fund you, or why regular VCs might not. We had a pretty damn compelling explanation.
Is it okay to share a little bit?
Well, I think it's pretty much what Kevin said, right? It's from the VC standpoint, it's in their eyes because nobody's done it before. It's hard and risky. And in terms of the traditional funding standpoint, well, it's not basic research because it's translational. They don't like really funding translational research, but it's not really translational because it's like building, like it's a moonshot kind of thing. And usually, SBIRs don't fund moonshots. That's why they created DARPA. So thank God for ARPA-H because otherwise, how would those moonshots get built?
Yeah, as an SBI reviewer, it's to convince these mostly PhD scientists to score highly a project that's not based in bench research. It's really, there aren't a lot of informaticists on these study sections either to get them to understand.
That's what we found. There weren't people with the subject matter expertise.
So I just happened to be this sort of unicorn that I understand patient care and understand informatics. So I was like, oh, I get it, you know? But that's not the norm.
Yeah.
You know, especially on study sections where people have been doing their science for a very long time and they understand what they understand, you know? And that's got to change. And how we change that for the next generation will be really interesting. As long as we keep on talking about telling the stories of what science can have an impact on the lives of the people around us and trying to communicate that better. Irene did very well today. I'm very proud of the storytelling that you've been doing. It's been great.
I agree. I think, and that's part of the reason, that's part of the goal for a lot of why I'm telling these stories is because I think it's important for people to not only understand the science of what you're doing, but also how it is going to impact why are we doing this in the first place? Because we want to have a bold and big difference on patients' lives, especially the ones that don't get a lot of the funding for research. I mean, we just talked about rare diseases. Like you could potentially be changing the trajectory of how we approach rare disease drug development for the future, which is like huge. So yeah, thank you for all of this. What do you wish that more people, so just coming back to Philadelphia, like what do you wish that more founders in this region understood about what's available to them in terms of resources or relationships or programs that maybe they're underutilizing?
ScienceCenter.org. We have some great stuff and we're always innovating and noodling on what we're doing, you know, and we're offering new programs. I'm working on 3 brand new programs literally. This week just went live with a physician innovator series for physicians that want to be part of the startup community, either as innovators themselves or entrepreneurs, even in the venture side of things. We have something called CHESS, which is a clinician advisor program for startup companies that need a doc, but don't want to go out and pay the monies for a doc. Yeah. So we have seasoned physicians who are already fractional CMOs and in the space. Cool. That we can contract out. We're always, it's just a couple examples, but we're always innovating on what we deliver. We listen to our founders and you hear what they have to say. We're creating like a vendor marketplace. So if you need the best person in regulatory, for the sake of conversation, we have now a set of vendors in that space who we've vetted, who we know we work with. Yeah. You don't have to choose one or the other, but we have 3 that we've approved. So making that stuff that founders do just a little bit easier so they can get to the milestone quicker and not end up going backwards. Sometimes they go backwards. I get to see that. Yeah. It's really expensive to go backwards. We try and figure out what to do in the whole concept translation project to get things quicker and without having to go sliding back down though.
My gosh, I love that. So to kind of close out our conversation is, in 3 to 5 years, what do you want to be true about Philadelphia's ecosystem that isn't true today? And what is it going to take from each of us to get us there? Like, what is the actual maybe next stepping stone for that?
I would love for there to be even a more vibrant biotech community, especially advanced therapies. I really think that that's an area where Philadelphia excels in. Right now, this is already getting kind of crowded by Philadelphia. I mean, Greater Philadelphia, expanding out into the region, whether it's King of Prussia or wherever. But there's a ton of space. We go not very far from the city center. The other thing is, I think maybe that might not be appreciated around the whole country is the cost effectiveness of doing business here in this region, and also so you've got proximity to New York, to Boston. I mean, for me, if it's a half-hour flight from Philadelphia Airport to Boston, or the train trip down to DC, and there are the brilliant students, as Kevin listed some of the universities and hospitals. I mean, there's no shortage of talent.
Yeah, I hope we can continue to attract and build the ecosystem out, because there's so much here. And beyond that, it's a great place to live and to eat. And that's important, I think, because that builds upon itself. And the convenience, we all have to go to Washington or New York or Boston, wherever, and it's so convenient. But you can have a great quality of life here in Philadelphia. And to be in a community where you bump into in these great places like we have here at the Science Center and convene people.
You bump into Nobel laureates without trying very hard.
You really do. It's the most incredible thing. You get invited to a lunch and you're like, you discovered that? That's what I'm sitting across from? It's very real, and that's cool. Scientists are kind of like a geeky group. We like other scientists. Our brains like to be with other scientists. And if we can continue to grow that and build that, and we have patients here who need our discoveries. And because we have such tertiary and quaternary hospitals and community hospitals in the area, I mean, there's such a patient population to continue to grow discovery. So you can do a randomized controlled trial at 4 hospitals, a car ride, like a simple car ride within a 15-minute drive.
Yeah.
And that's incredible. And we need to build that out more and make it easier for, I could dream of a unified IRB. Wouldn't that be the greatest thing in the world?
Amazing.
Things from the clinical trial space to the procurement space that we can make it easier to get through the process, so that once we have discoveries and we have more rapid turnaround, we can get them to patients quicker. There's a lot of that infrastructure and build stuff that I think we can do in the next 3 to 5 years, that we're also working on that. That's a real possibility.
The other thing that's, I think, unusual about our region, both, Pennsylvania and Delaware, is our proximity to our legislators and how open-minded they are and wanting to actually help companies, help small businesses, and help patients and their constituents. And I think, in a bipartisan way, they're...
And it's bipartisan, which is... Nothing's bipartisan.
No, it truly is, especially... Everybody wants to help small businesses. Everybody wants to help families and patients. Yeah. So I think that's
huge.
Big unifying factor. Yeah,
that's huge. Oh my gosh, Actually, I hadn't heard that yet. A lot of people talk about the investments and the ecosystem and so forth, but the access to the government and legislators and the support that there is,
And then being open,
Yeah.
having open doors and being open to ideas and discussions.
Yeah.
And they have been, especially along the way with this
Yeah.
project. You
Yeah.
know, it's like, okay, we'll listen and we'll do everything we can.
That's
And they
awesome.
really have been helpful.
Yeah.
From
Amazing.
Coon's office to McCormick's office, both sides of the political spectrum. There hasn't been like,
Yeah.
no, we won't help. It's like, tell us what you need and let's see what we can do to
Oh,
help.
that's fantastic. Oh my God.
That never happens.
Yeah, that's awesome.
You know?
Well, I want to thank you both so much for spending this time with me, sharing just the incredible science that is coming out of BioCurie and now is going to be coming to fruition. I think it's just incredible to see what the possibilities are. Like, to your point, it was a vision before. Now you actually have the physical software that you can take it forward from beta testing. And so really excited to follow your progress and see what happens for the future of drug discovery and development and patients ultimately. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.